Hello, this is Catherine from Accelerated Reader Reading Books for You. Today, I will be reading Chapter 3 from The Moon and the Magic Box by Michael Ross, illustrated by Magdalena Adic. Before I begin reading, I would like to give a big thanks to the author for sending me this book to read on my channel. In the description below, I've included links where you may find and purchase this book. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chapter 3 Major Cringeworthy. Major Cringeworthy was speeding along in a convoy of 3 shiny black SUVs, making their way down south on the motorway. The SUVs were only a foot apart from each other and were traveling at just over 100 miles an hour. They had darkened, bulletproof windows and specially reinforced bodywork that could withstand a small missile if necessary. Giles Alabaster Cringeworthy was smiling to himself. He was pleased because the Chief of Staff, General Gerald Fortescue Snide, had put him in charge of this investigation. There was nothing Cringeworthy couldn't do. He had the full resources of the military at his beck and call. It included weapons and even the use of advanced tactical torture techniques by a small team that had used these techniques to their fullest extent in all the major conflicts within the last 5 years. Some of these methods were borderline on being investigated by various human rights conventions. Indeed, some of the techniques were most definitely under-the-counter techniques that would never be approved in any civilized country. Sitting opposite Cringeworthy was a diminutive woman, Sergeant Doris Blackmood. Dressed in regulation military uniform, she looked very prim and proper, her blonde, shoulder-length hair severely tied into a bun on the back of her head. It was perfectly placed so that her military hat fitted on her head perfectly. Her shoes were pulled up so that they were shiny to the extent you could almost see your face in them. Her thick regulation stockings and the masculine cut of her uniform seemed to remove any vestiges of femininity. However, when she spoke, a smooth feminine voice came out, very polite, always concise and to the point. To Cringeworthy, she was a walking, talking computer. She remembered every date and time of any meeting, what was said, and what needed to be actioned. To Cringeworthy, she was an object first, a soldier second. What Cringeworthy did not know was that below that facade, she was a very kind and compassionate person. She would never dare let that show to Cringeworthy because he would dismiss her immediately. She knew he looked on her as a machine to obey orders and never question anything he said. He was, to all intents and purposes, a control freak because she had a head for numbers and loved being a statistician that she stayed in this job. Truth be known, she had always thought Cringeworthy a crass, rude man with not a kind word for anybody, who wouldn't think twice about stabbing someone in the back to further his military career. Both his parents were in the forces. Even at home, his father ran the house as if it were an army barracks. From an early age, discipline was hard and cruel for Cringeworthy, with times when his father would send him to his room with no food, TV, mobile phone, and so on for something or nothing. His father deliberately called it solitary conditioning rather than solitary confinement. If ever his mother tried to intervene, she was severely admonished, and most times would run out of the room weeping. And so his upbringing must have had a direct influence on how he behaved with everyone he came into contact with as an adult. Cringeworthy was smiling to himself. He was in his own weird little world. Little did he know, however, that Blackmood hated his pencil-like short black mustache that clung to his top lip. It made him look like that monster from World War II, Adolf Hitler. And here she was facing him now. She had to close her eyes every so often. Just the look of him was enough to wonder what cruelty he was conjuring up in his head. Blackmood jumped a little as Cringeworthy barked out, "Right, Blackmood. The plan is we investigate the crash site of this alien box-like object, or whatever it is, secure it, and transport it immediately to the temporary Army research facility we are putting together. Got it?" Yes, sir. Got it, sir," said Blackmood. "Humph. Yes. Well, good man, Blackmood." "Can't he see I am a female?" thought Blackmood. Then, into her mind, she played a fantasy moment where she was lifting her skirt and imagined herself taunting Cringeworthy by tangling her suspenders, holding up her stockings. She started to smile. "What's so funny, Blackmood?" said Cringeworthy with a quizzical look on his face. "Oh, nothing, sir. Sorry, sir," said Blackmood, and set her persona as before. Cringeworthy continued to look at her, screwing up his eyes a little, concentrating, as if he was trying to read her mind. Under such scrutiny, Blackmood blushed a little and wiped a stray hair that had fallen out of her bun. She tucked expertly back into the base of the bun. She was desperate for a toilet stop, but she knew it was out of the question. Cringeworthy would deem it a human weakness, which did not come into Cringeworthy's way of thinking. If anything, it was a sign of undisciplined weakness, even, not to be tolerated by any man under his command. So Blackmood sat there, counting the minutes until they arrived at their destination. Half an hour later, they arrived at Crankington Haven. A temporary camp was already set up on the approaches to Bramble Wood. Cringeworthy was in his element, barking out orders left, right, and center. It was an excellent opportunity for Blackmood. It meant she was able to sneak off for that much-needed toilet break. It was quite late now. Cringeworthy glanced at his watch. 1:30 in the morning. The air was warm and balmy. He could just about make out a smell of burnt pine trees. By now, Blackmood had sidled up just behind Cringeworthy. He turned around and said to her, "Ah, there you are, Blackmood. We're going to make our way up to Bramble Wood, sir," Blackmood said quickly. Yes, Bramble Wood. I have soldiers in place at the entrance of the wood where this object had made its first point of contact. We will investigate, retrieve the object, and transport it, not to where it was originally planned, but to a second National Trust car park just to the south of where we are now. A temporary camp has been set up as I speak. It will accommodate 30 staff, some of whom are scientists concerned with alien contact investigations. Right, let's get to it. And with that, a group of several soldiers, including 2 of the scientists, and, of course, Blackmood, set off up to the hills towards Bramble Wood. At one point, they came to the giant oak tree that Troy, Desme, and Nesbit had been lying down beside. Cringeworthy stopped. He looked at the area just under the tree and kneeled to get a better look. "Bring those halogen lamps over here," he shouted, his command out to no one in particular, but 2 soldiers came up right away and shone the light onto the ground. "What do you make of this, Blackmood?" said Cringeworthy, jabbing his officer's staff into the spread-out pile of hay. "Pretty significant if you ask me," continued Cringeworthy. All the other soldiers and scientists were looking confused, scratching their heads. They hadn't a clue what Cringeworthy was talking about. Of course, they would never tell him. They just nodded vigorously as if they did understand. "Well, can't you see? This spread-out pile of hay was not done so by any animal I know. This has been spread out by beings, possibly sentient beings. We need to be on our guard, right? Onwards and upwards." He stood up and continued to stride purposefully up the hill. For a few seconds, you could tell everyone was still wondering what Cringeworthy was ranting on about, but they also continued and quickly caught up with him. They were right on the outskirts of Bramble Wood. Cringeworthy stopped abruptly at the point where the box had landed. It caught the others by surprise, so 1 or 2 bumped into each other, and all you could hear was, "Oops, sorry, whoa." Cringeworthy turned around and gave them one of his well-known evil glares. They didn't move a muscle. They held their breaths. Cringeworthy turned back to face the entrance to the forest. He called forward a couple of the soldiers with machine guns, who now preceded him and the posse into the wood. They noticed the fractured pine trees, the small pieces of wood embers that were still glowing red, the ripped-up path in the soil, and detritus of the wood floor where the object had landed, then traveled along, gouging out a mini trough. Slowly but surely, they made their way forward. At every stage, 2 of the group were either recording their every action or taking photographs. Cringeworthy, annoyingly to everyone else, kept stopping and talking to the camera, stating the obvious. Blackmood was thinking, "OMG, he does love himself, doesn't he?" Then Cringeworthy went off on one of his rants, simply because the soldier who was filming him stifled a yawn. He shouted at him, "If you can't stay awake, I will make sure you end up cleaning the latrines back at HQ for the next 6 months. Pull yourself together, man." The soldier looked suitably chastised. They continued onwards. Before long, the group came to what looked like the resting place of the object. There was certainly nothing ahead, or to the east or west, suggesting that this had to have been the resting place for the object. The scientists came forward with Geiger counters, taking measurements. Other soldiers were investigating the undergrowth all around the resting place. Cringeworthy knelt and carefully investigated the hole in the ground. Here was a partial impression in the soil of something square-shaped. You could see he was grappling with trying to come to terms with what was before him. All the evidence was there leading up to this point, and now, nothing? Nothing at all? While he was kneeling, he half whispered under his breath, "What does all this mean? I know it landed. I know it traveled along the forest floor. I know this is the resting place. But where the hell is the object? It can't just have disappeared." Blackmood heard him. She stepped up behind him and said, "Sir, do you think that possibly the object has been taken by someone?" Everyone in the group held their breath. Seconds seemed to tick by as Cringeworthy was trying to come to terms with the fact that Blackmood was probably right. Cringeworthy abruptly stood up. The whole group stepped back 1 pace, waiting. Cringeworthy shouted out, "What? Taken? Stolen more like? This is a punishable offense. The object is government property. How dare they?" He was bristling with rage now. To Blackmood, it was reminiscent of a bull about to charge into a China tea shop with steam coming out of its nostrils, pawing at the ground as angry bulls do. Cringeworthy was angry, very angry. He was wearing knee-length army-issue leather boots. To let off steam, he shouted out, "Right!" and swiftly brought down his officer's staff, aiming to whack it onto the side of his right boot. But he missed slightly and caught his knee at the same time. He stifled a cry of pain, and he bent down to rub his knee. How the others in the group did not burst out laughing, nobody will ever know. He turned to look at them all in the group. He was searching their faces for any hint of reaction to what he had just done to himself. He needed to vent his anger on someone, anyone, he thought to himself. "Just one of you give me an excuse, any excuse, and I will make you regret it for the rest of your life." But nobody reacted in the slightest way. He seemed to calm down a little. The group breathed a mental sigh of relief. "Blackmood?" barked out Cringeworthy. "Yes, sir," said Blackmood. It made Cringeworthy jump a little. He didn't realize she was right behind him. "Ah, there you are. Right. Let's set up an investigative team. I need to know who or what has taken the object. I am sure they couldn't have traveled far with the object. Since it is primarily farmland, there won't be many farms within a 2-mile radius of the object's point of entry to the wood. At first light, we will begin to trawl around the farms in the area. I want no stone unturned. I will get to the bottom of this, and I will make the perpetrators pay. Mark my words." As he said this, Blackmood was already feeling sorry for whoever may have taken the object. The full force of Cringeworthy's anger and the full might of the army would come crashing down upon them. Cringeworthy and Blackmood worked through the night. They determined that there were only 3 farms within the 2-mile radius of the crash site. There was Highview, Cozy Nook, and Apple Orchard Farm. Since Cringeworthy believed that farms were up and running while the rest of the population were still sleeping, they would start their investigation with Highview Farm at 0800 hours. The military drove in, sweeping past the fields of sheep and cows, and stopped in a cloud of dust at the front door of the farm. They were only there 15 minutes. A search of the barns and the farmhouse revealed nothing at all. In any case, the owners were quite elderly and didn't register on Cringeworthy's radar at all of the would-be thieves. Next was Cozy Nook Farm. It wasn't a typical farm as such. They had acres and acres of lavender fields. They also had a small herd of Devon black cows for beef and a few Jersey cows for their wonderful creamy milk. Twice, Cringeworthy stepped in some runny cow pats. The sight of him going to a grassy verge and wiping the sides of his boots in the grass, while muttering expletives under his breath, made the rest of the investigative group snigger. Blackmood and some of the soldiers watched as Cringeworthy disappeared into a small wooden hut. For a few moments, there was silence. Everyone looked at each other. What was he doing? Then, running out came Cringeworthy, with a look of abject terror on his face, closely followed by a gaggle of large angry geese, honking at the top of their voices. Again, the investigations were not fruitful. A thorough search revealed nothing out of the ordinary at all. Just before he left, Cringeworthy said to the farmer and his wife, in a very intimidating way, "This is an ongoing investigation. Under no circumstances should you attempt to leave the country." He turned on his heel and stormed off. The farmer and his wife just looked at each other, mouthed the words, "Leave the country?" and started laughing uncontrollably. Back in the SUVs, they started to make their way to the last farm on their list, Apple Orchard Farm. They would be there in only a few minutes. Cringeworthy was rubbing his hands together. He had the strongest of feelings that the object had to be at this farm, no doubt about it. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In the description below, I've included links where you may find and purchase this book.